This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Tuesday, the group Privacy International sued Britain's intelligence agency for illegally developing spy programs that remotely hijack computers and mobile devices. According to the legal complaint, the British GCHQ and the National Security Agency can now take over a device's microphone and record conversations occurring near the device, take over a device's webcam and snap photographs, retrieve any content from a phone, log keystrokes entered into a device, and identify the geographic whereabouts of the user. Eric King of Privacy International said, quote, "The hacking programs being undertaken by GCHQ are the modern equivalent of the government entering your house, rummaging through your filing cabinets, diaries, journals, and correspondence before planting bugs in every room you enter," he said. Privacy International's legal complaint is based on documents leaked by former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden and first reported on by Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Glenn Greenwald and The Intercept. Well, today we'll spend the rest of the hour with part 2 of our interview with Glenn Greenwald, author of the new book, No Place to Hide: Edward Snowden, the NSA, and the U.S. Surveillance State. Glenn Greenwald and filmmaker Laura Poitras were the journalists who first met Snowden in Hong Kong last June. Glenn Greenwald came by Democracy Now! Studios on Monday. I asked him to talk about how Edward Snowden first reached out to him.
He first tried to contact me, or did contact me, back in December of 2012 when he sent me an anonymous email using the name Cincinnatus, which is the name of a 5th BC Roman emperor who had famously been recruited to become essentially the emperor of Rome to vanquish a foreign enemy, and then voluntarily gave up power after he succeeded and was at the height of his power and said, "I'm going back to my farm," and became sort of the symbol of civic virtue, somebody who uses power for the collective good and not for their own personal aggrandizement. And that was the name Snowden chose when he first contacted me. The problem was that he was afraid, for obvious reasons, the reasons that are now obvious, to tell me much about who he was or what he had. All he would say essentially was, "I have a story for you," but as you know, we get contacted every day by people claiming to have stories, often which turn out to be, most of the time, which turn out to be nothing. And so I didn't prioritize it. He wanted me to install encryption so that we could talk securely, and I never did. And he tried essentially for 7 weeks and finally gave up, and then went to Laura Poitras, my friend, the award-winning documentarian. She did have encryption, and we were able to start speaking that way about the story that he had.
And talk about what eventually brought you and Snowden to Hong Kong.
Well, when I first talked to Snowden, which was in the early part of May, he was a huge mystery, both to myself and Laura. All we knew is that he was claiming that he had access to incredibly incriminating documents at the highest level of the national security state, but we didn't know who he was or how he got those documents or even what those documents were. And from the beginning, he was insistent that we travel to Hong Kong in order to meet him. And the idea that he was in Hong Kong was quite mystifying, both to myself and Laura, and raised a lot of flags of suspicion, because we obviously assumed when it was time to meet him that we were going to be traveling to Northern Virginia or Southern Maryland, which is where most of the people who work at these agencies reside. And it was very difficult to understand why somebody with access to these kind of documents would be in Hong Kong, of all places. And he was a little bit reluctant to talk about that. I didn't push much to get information, because I didn't want to make him feel like he was being interrogated, especially early on, before a bond of trust had been created. And the only thing I said was, of course, I'm willing to come to Hong Kong, given the magnitude of what you're saying you're able to give me. But before I get on a plane and travel all the way across the world, I just would like to see some sample of the material that you're prepared to turn over. And he said that's completely understandable. He sent to me through encryption programs that he helped me, walk me through step by step to install roughly 24 top secret NSA documents that I received sitting at my home in Rio de Janeiro. It was the first time any documents had leaked from this most secretive agency inside the U.S. government ever. The documents themselves were explosive. Among them was the documents detailing the PRISM program, in which the NSA had obtained access directly to the servers of the largest internet company so that they could get the emails and chats that they wanted directly. And so when I got that first set of documents, I knew that this story was very serious. The source was at least somewhat reliable, that it wasn't just a crank or a crazy person. And the very next day, I got on the plane. I flew to New York to meet with my editors at The Guardian. I met Laura there. And the day after that, on the first available plane, we flew the 16 hours to Hong Kong to meet Edward Snowden.